Messiness is how the healing journey unfolds. It's a very messy process, but we absorb from society very commonly this persistent, quite pathological notion that there is some final point or end goal. And you can feel that energy in everyone, or a lot of people, a lot of the time, of like, once I've just got this thing sorted, everything's just going to be okay. I just can't wait for this one thing to be over, right? Whether it's amongst more, people who are into the healing, it's like once I've just sorted this one pattern that I've got, everything's going to be okay. And once I've just got my house the way I like it, everything's been okay. Once my friend has just, my partner has got through this phase, there's some imagined like uber relaxation where everything just comes to an end and you can sort of bask, sort of just like lying on when you're lying on your back in the sea and just looking, and there's the sun above you, and you can hear that like blah, 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 blah in your ears. It's kind of like that, but on some sort of cosmic existential level that people are imagining. And it's never going to come. Life is, and the healing journey and personal growth and whatever you want to call it, is persistently, exquisitely messy and non-linear and rough around the edges and chaotic. And it's by design, actually. So, when we're stuck in this mode of like, once I've just got this done, we're sucked into this story of us on this timeline, which is quite restrictive and a bit dry, and it tends to be driven by either fear or kind of a sense of lack, fear of something happening, so I've got to fix it, or a sense of lack, so I've got to get to this place. And it takes us out of the moment and what's actually here. Like, it's a bit of a cliche, but it also happens to be true that, the only moment is right here, right now. Like, if you're not enjoying life now, you're never enjoying life. And life, the movement towards embodying that wisdom of being able to be present is this kind of journey of messiness, because growth, healing, is all about parts of you dying, essentially. Like, when you're growing, it's like parts of you, patterns and behaviors that you took on, that you learned to adopt to stay safe in childhood, are being let go of, and they're normally making a hell of a lot of noise on the way out. One of my teachers, Prajna, she would always say to me, it's loudest on the way out. When you've got stuff moving through, whether it's some emotional wound, some pattern that you're becoming more and more conscious of, it's gonna kick and scream. And so in those periods of deepest growth is precisely when you can be most all over the place, where you're acting out in all kinds of ways, or there's a lot of emotional turmoil going on because that stuff's rising to the surface and passing through. And in that death process, it's kicking and screaming. And that just creates a lot of, can create, I say, a lot of different degrees of messiness in your life. And so in that sense, it's a good sign. I guess it's not so much that you want to get rid of the messiness. And I'm talking here about sort of external messiness, as well as internal messiness. People often fixate on the external messiness, wanting to get their life sorted. I think really it's the process is more one of clearing up sort of the internal messiness. By that I mean the fragmentation that is part of the sort of the key psychological process that humans undergo, whereby when you're growing up, certain parts of you are not acceptable, certain emotions, certain behaviors, certain expressions, and so you push them down, you deny them and stuff them into your unconscious, and you come up with compensations that are more approval based instead. So say you're a very loud, curious kid, and you're constantly getting, asking questions, getting your hands into stuff, but you get told off every time. Eventually you learn to withdraw and be more introverted and incurious. And so you push down your extroverted self and you become this curious mask, incurious and introverted mask, right? And that feels really horrible. And that split is a kind of messiness within, right? There's part of you that's been swept under the rug, and there's a part of you that's kind of fake. It's like in your house, like you have a bunch of dirt swept under the rug, and you've got a bunch of like really like fake plants out front, and it's like, what's going on here? It doesn't feel quite right. And so we're cleaning up the mess under the rug, bringing that extroverted part back up, and we're relaxing that sort of more learned, fake, conditioned part, and maybe replacing it with something a bit more real, some real plants, right? And that's kind of clearing up the internal mess a little bit. And that process never ends, but it tends to, you sort of attune to its flows and rhythms. And after a few years, it tends to calm down. It's a little more intense in the first few years when you open Pandora's box and everything starts coming up. But it does tend to calm down. And you also, what's key is you really start to trust the messiness. You trust the process, because you see that every time the messiness intensifies and you really meet it and you wallow in that messiness, not in a sort of a negative way, but you marinade is a better word in that messiness, and you fully feel and allow it. Afterwards, there is a, you process it and there is a reward, there's a period of peace, or there's some beautiful insight. And you see that they're linked. They're dualistically linked. You can't have one without the other. So this infinite messiness is linked to a kind of an infinite joy and reward and beauty as well, because it's in that messiness. I call it the cosmic squeeze, when it's just you're being put through the ringer. There's external and internal chaos. If you really meet that, that's what leads to the subsequent peace afterwards. So you can't really have one without the other. And so the goal is not so much to, this imagined place where everything will be fine and you never have to deal with messiness again. It's more to do with learning to trust the process, to embrace the messiness, realizing that it's this sort of part of this infinite game that we're playing with ourselves, and sort of learning to appreciate it, that's actually where all the joy and love comes from life. This messiness is like, it's like raw carbon waiting to be pressurized into a beautiful diamond. And it also helps you, if you realize it's never ever going to end, like truly it's never ever going to end in some ultimate way. Like there'll be periods of peace and happiness, but then there'll be other periods, life. My favorite quote is from the Buddha. It's like, whatever you think the future holds, it will be different. Whatever your mind's going, once I have this, it'll be this way. It's wrong. That you can ditch that. If your mind's coming up with it, it's going to be different to that. And just learning to develop the skills to just go with the flow of that process, with as little suffering as possible. If there's chaos and messiness coming up and we're resisting it really hard, if we're not well resourced in our life, if we don't have the skills we need to meet what's coming up, that messiness magnifies and metastasizes. Whereas if you are very well resourced, you've got your life set up in a way that you have support, you have some skills to be able to feel the feelings that are coming up, to know how to navigate your resistance to it. You're giving yourself time out to deal with it, whatever it might be. You'll find that the messiness is kept to a manageable proportion most of the time, at least. So yeah, food for thought. I hope that was helpful. Remember, life, it's always messy. There's no, just embrace the mess. Nothing is going wrong. That's what I'm trying to say here, really. Nothing has gone wrong if life is messy. It's part of the package and the design. Bye.